If you are watching this right now, something has already changed inside you. And I do not mean that as a vague spiritual platitude. I mean it as a precise energetic fact. Something that used to hold you together, some invisible architecture that kept your days predictable and your sense of self intact, has quietly dissolved. You may not have the language for it yet. You may not even fully recognize what happened. But your being knows. Your body knows. The fact that you are here, listening to these words at this exact moment in your life, is not coincidence. It is confirmation. You are not breaking down. You are not losing your mind. You are not falling behind. You are in the 3%, and your reality is already shifting. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Because this is not about being special in the way the ego craves specialness. This is not about being chosen or elite or better than anyone else walking this earth. This is about a very specific energetic threshold that most human beings never cross. Not because they cannot, but because they will not. They will not because crossing it requires something that the mind finds absolutely terrifying. It requires letting go of who you were, not improving who you were, not healing who you were, not repackaging who you were with better habits and a morning routine, letting go entirely, releasing the entire construct, allowing the whole architecture of your former self to come undone like a sandcastle returning to the shore. And you, whether you chose it consciously or whether life chose it for you, have already begun that process. The dissolution is underway, and there is no going back. Here is what no one tells you about transformation. Real transformation, not the kind you read about in books or see in before and after photos, but the kind that rewrites the very fabric of your experienced reality. No one tells you that it feels like dying. No one tells you that the space between who you were and who you are becoming is not filled with light and clarity and angelic music. It is filled with fog. It is filled with silence. It is filled with a disorientation so profound that you begin to question whether you ever knew anything at all. And that questioning, that radical unknowing, is not the problem. It is the point. It is the entire point. Think about what you have been experiencing lately, and I want you to be honest with yourself here. Not the version of honest where you perform self-awareness for an imaginary audience, but the kind of honest, Moshe, that happens at 3 in the morning when no one is watching, and the mask has slipped, and you are left with nothing but the raw truth of what you feel. Have you noticed that the things that used to excite you no longer carry the same charge? That goals you once pursued with fire and hunger now feel strangely hollow, like reaching for fruit that looks ripe on the outside but has nothing inside? Have you felt a growing distance between yourself and people you once felt deeply connected to, not because of conflict or betrayal, but because something in you has shifted and the frequency no longer matches? Have you caught yourself staring at your own reflection and feeling, even for a brief disorienting moment, like you are looking at someone you used to know? Someone familiar but no longer quite you. If any of this resonates, breathe into it. Do not rush past it. Do not try to explain it away or diagnose it or fix it. Just let the recognition land. Because what you are experiencing is not random. It is not a midlife crisis. It is not depression, although it can wear depression's clothes. It is not anxiety, although it can borrow anxiety's voice. What you are experiencing is the felt sensation of an identity dissolving at the quantum level. And that sentence is not a metaphor. Let me explain exactly what I mean. In quantum physics, There is a principle so strange, so counterintuitive, that even the physicists who discovered it struggled to accept its implications. It is called the observer effect. At the subatomic level, particles do not exist in fixed states. An electron, for example, does not sit in one location like a tiny marble waiting to be found. Before it is observed, it exists as what physicists call a wave function, a cloud of probability, a field of potential spread across multiple possible positions simultaneously. It is everywhere and nowhere. It is all possibilities at once, and then something remarkable happens. The moment a conscious observer looks at it, the moment attention is directed toward it, the wave function collapses. The infinite possibilities reduce to a single actuality. The electron appears in one definite place, not because it was always there, but because the act of observation itself called it into being. Now pause with that for a moment. Really let that settle into your understanding. Reality at its most fundamental level does not exist in a fixed state until consciousness interacts with it. The universe does not decide what is real until something is there to witness it. Observation is not passive. Observation is creative. The act of looking is the act of making. Now here is where this becomes personal. Here is where this stops being a physics lesson and starts becoming the most important truth you will ever encounter about your own life. Your identity works the same way. Who you believe yourself to be is not a fixed thing. It is not a solid structure made of permanent material. It is a wave function. It is a field of infinite potential selves that gets collapsed into one specific experience of selfhood through the act of repeated observation. Every day of your life, you have been observing yourself into existence. Every morning you woke up and without even realizing it, you performed an act of quantum measurement on your own being. You looked at yourself through the lens of your memories, your beliefs, your wounds, your habits, your stories, and you collapsed the infinite wave of what you could be into the same familiar particle of who you always were. The same personality, the same reactions, the same limitations, the same self, over and over and over, day after day after day, not because that was the truth of you, but because that was the habit of your observation. Your parents observed you into a certain shape when you were young. Their expectations, their fears, their projections became the first lens through which your wave function was collapsed. Then culture added its lens, then school, then relationships, then career. Then your own internalized voice took over the job, and you began collapsing yourself with such efficiency, such unconscious precision, that the particle of your identity felt absolutely solid. It felt like stone. It felt like the most real thing in the world. And you built your entire life on top of it. But it was never stone. It was light. It was a pattern of focused attention held in place by the sheer force of repetitive observation, like a hologram that only appears solid because the laser never wavers. And what has happened to you, what is happening to you right now, is that the laser has wavered. The observation has shifted. The repetitive pattern of collapsing yourself into the same identity has been interrupted, and the wave function of your being has begun to return to its natural state. Not collapsed, not fixed, not defined. Open, unresolved, infinite. This is what I call the quantum identity collapse. And it is simultaneously the most terrifying and the most liberating event that can occur in a human life. If this is landing for you, if you can feel the truth of this in your body right now, take a moment and hit that like button and subscribe to this channel so these transmissions can continue to find the people who need them. Let me describe what this looks like from the inside because I want you to recognize yourself in this description. I want you to see that what you have been going through is not chaos. It is precision. It is a process with a structure, even though it feels like freefall. The first thing that happens is that the old story stops working. And by story, I do not mean a narrative you consciously tell. I mean the deep, unconscious script that has been running your life since before you had language. The story that says, I am this kind of person. I always react this way. I am good at these things and bad at those things. I deserve this much love and no more. I am limited in these specific ways. That story, which felt as real and as permanent as gravity, begins to lose its hold. It does not happen all at once. It happens in flickers. Moments where you catch yourself about to react in the old familiar way, and something in you hesitates. Moments where you look at your life, the job, the relationship, the city, the routine, and instead of the usual sense of this is just how things are, you feel a strange transparency to it all, as if you can suddenly see through the walls of your own life and sense the vast open space behind them. This is disorienting, profoundly disorienting, because your mind has been trained to navigate by the landmarks of your identity. Your sense of self was the map, and now the map is dissolving. You are standing in a landscape with no markers, no compass, no North Star. The mind panics. It reaches for the old reference points. It tries to reconstruct the story. It says you are having a crisis. It says something is wrong with you. It says you need to get back on track, find your purpose, set new goals, fix this. But every attempt to rebuild the old structure feels hollow. Every effort to recollapse yourself into the familiar pattern meets a strange internal resistance, as if something deeper than your mind, something wiser than your thoughts, is refusing to let you go backward. And this is the second phase, the resistance of the deeper self against the mind's desperate attempt to reconstruct the old identity. This feels like an internal war. Part of you wants to go back to normal. Part of you knows, with a certainty that has no logical basis, that normal no longer exists for you, that the door you walked through has closed behind you, and the room you left is no longer there. This creates a very specific kind of suffering. Not the suffering of something going wrong, but the suffering of something going profoundly, irreversibly right in a way that your current understanding cannot yet accommodate. The exhaustion you have been feeling. Let me speak to that directly, because I know it has been unlike any tiredness you have experienced before. This is not the exhaustion of working too hard or sleeping too little. This is a bone-deep cellular level fatigue that no amount of rest seems to touch. And the reason is simple, though the mind will resist the simplicity of it. You have been expending enormous amounts of energy trying to hold together a structure that is in the process of dissolving. Imagine trying to keep a sandcastle intact while the tide is coming in. Imagine the effort required to rebuild each wall as fast as the water takes it down. That is what your system has been doing. Trying to maintain coherence in an identity that has already begun its return to the formless. The exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It is the energetic cost of resistance. And the moment you stop resisting, the moment you allow the dissolution to complete itself, you will discover a reservoir of energy you did not know you possessed, because the energy that was being used to maintain the old pattern will be freed, and that energy is immense. I want to pause here and ask you something. What was the moment for you? When did you first feel the old identity start to crack? Was it sudden, or was it a slow unraveling you only recognized in hindsight? Share that moment in the comments, because your story might be the exact confirmation someone else needs to hear right now. The confusion is similar. Your mind is a pattern recognition system. It is designed to take the raw data of experience and organize it into coherent categories based on your existing model of reality. But your existing model of reality is the very thing that is dissolving. So the mind keeps trying to sort new experiences into old categories and finding that nothing fits. It is like trying to run new software on an operating system that is in the middle of being replaced. The programs glitch, the screen freezes, error messages appear everywhere, and the mind interprets this as something is broken. But nothing is broken. The system is upgrading, and during the upgrade, the old programs are supposed to stop working. That is not a malfunction. That is the process working exactly as it should. Here is where it gets interesting. Here is where we move from understanding what happened to understanding why it matters on a scale far larger than your individual life. There is a concept in physics called phase transition. It describes the moment when a substance changes from one state to another. Water turning to ice, ice turning to water, water turning to steam. What is fascinating about phase transitions is that they do not happen gradually. They happen at critical thresholds. You can cool water slowly and steadily, and it remains liquid, remains liquid, remains liquid, and then at exactly 0 degrees, everything changes at once. The entire structure reorganizes. The molecules that were flowing freely suddenly lock into a crystalline pattern. Or in the case of heating, the molecules that were locked in structure suddenly break free into a completely new state of being. The substance does not become a better version of what it was. It becomes something categorically different. This is what is happening to you. And this is what is happening to a very small percentage of human beings on this planet right now. You have reached a critical threshold. The energetic temperature of your consciousness has risen to the point where the old state, the old structure of identity, can no longer be maintained, and you are undergoing a phase transition. Not an improvement, not an upgrade in the conventional sense, a fundamental change in state. You are not becoming a better version of your old self. You're becoming a different order of being entirely. And this is why the old tools stopped working. This is why affirmations feel hollow. This is why setting goals feels pointless. This is why even therapy, which may have served you beautifully in the past, now feels like it is addressing a person who no longer exists. Because those tools were designed for the old state. They were designed to optimize water. But you are becoming steam. You cannot optimize water when the water is turning to steam. You have to learn an entirely new physics. And here is the part that will either terrify you or set you free, depending on how willing you are to release your grip on the old paradigm. The 3% is not a number I chose for dramatic effect. Research in consciousness, in behavioral psychology, in the science of human change, consistently shows that the vast majority of people, roughly 97%, will live their entire lives within the identity they inherited. They will modify it. They will improve it. They will decorate it and renovate it, and sometimes even do significant repair work on it. But they will never leave the building. They will never experience what it means to have the entire structure dissolve and find themselves standing in the open air of unconditioned awareness. Not because they are incapable, but because the phase transition requires something that the human system is profoundly resistant to. It requires a complete surrender of the known. It requires a standing in the gap between who you were and who you have not yet become, and being willing to not fill that gap with anything, to just be there, in the emptiness, in the not knowing, in the free fall. Most people, the moment they feel the first tremors of dissolution, the moment the old identity begins to flicker, will grab onto something, anything, a new belief system, a new relationship, a new goal, a new distraction, anything to recollapse the wave function, anything to feel solid again, and the universe allows it. Free will is always honored, but the phase transition is aborted. The water cools back down, the old structure reforms, and the opportunity passes. You did not do that, or rather, you are not doing that. You are here. You are listening. You are standing in the dissolution, and instead of running, you are turning toward it. You are asking, what is this? You are asking, what is happening to me? And that willingness, that raw courage to stay present in the unknown, is what separates the 3% from the rest of humanity. It is not intelligence. It is not spiritual achievement. It is not worthiness. It is willingness. The willingness to let go of who you were without yet knowing who you will become. So let us talk about what you are becoming. Let us talk about what exists on the other side of this dissolution. Because the void you are standing in is not empty. It only appears empty to the mind that is still, looking for the old furniture. The mind says, I had a couch here. I had a table here. I had a sense of purpose here. Where did everything go? And because it cannot find the familiar objects, it concludes that the room is empty. But the room is not empty. The room is full. It is full of something the mind has never been trained to perceive. It is full of potential. Pure, uncollapsed, infinite potential.
And if you're still here, still watching, still feeling something shift inside you, that's not consciousness, that's alignment. Because the truth is, most people will hear this and move on. They'll scroll, distract themselves, go back to the same patterns. But you didn't. You paused. You felt it. You recognized it. That's why you're in the 3%. And when your awareness changes, your decisions change. When your decisions change, your entire reality begins to reorganize itself around you. So don't ignore this moment. This isn't motivation. This is activation. Your reality isn't about to shift. It already has. Now the only question is, will you rise with it